Welcome to the Roman Rite with Brian Newberry, where Christ is King and Rome is home. It is April 5th, 2026, Easter evening. Happy Easter, everyone. Hope everyone had a blessed Easter at your Mass or wherever you gathered today. Hope you ate a delicious Easter dinner. I know I did. A little bit sleepy tonight. Tonight will be a shorter show than usual. I know I say that sometimes and then I ramble on and on and on. This time it will be shorter, relatively speaking. This will conclude our four-part series on John the 23rd, the man sometimes known as Saint Pope John the 23rd, or the good old Pope John, who was elected in 1958. And tonight we will be discussing his election, which is very mysterious, the circumstances that surrounded the entire incident. And then we will also summarize his life and his pontificate, and then we will come to a conclusion of what are we to make of this, right? What is the conclusion that we can draw from all of the gathered information using deductive reasoning and the teaching of the Church? It's a very interesting topic, and then we'll get into that, and of course we'll get into the Sedevacante theological position. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it, right? The mysterious conclave of 1958. There were several top contenders for the papacy after the death of Pope Pius XII. One of the top prelates was Alfredo Cardinal Ottaviani, who was a renowned traditional, i.e. anti-modernist, Catholic. He was in charge of the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office, and he was very confident that he would be elected as the next pope. He even had selected his regnal name as Pope Pius XIII. Other strong contenders included Cardinals Agagianin, a modernist sympathizer, Cardinal Lercaro, a modernist sympathizer, and Cardinal Siri, who was an anti-communist and anti-modernist. The U.S. government also signified that they were very interested in another staunch anti-communist like they had in Pius XII. Keep in mind the historical background here is we are in peak Cold War period. So the American government's official position was very anti-communist, and Dwight Eisenhower was president at the time. Right? There are witnesses who say that the American intelligence agencies had been notified that Cardinal Siri had been initially elected as the next pope. Right? This aligns with the fact that initially white smoke had emerged from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, which signifies that a new pope has been elected, right? So the consensus is that Cardinal Siri was elected as pope, right? So hold that thought. We'll get back to that in a minute. Several minutes passed by after the white smoke came through the chimney, and no one emerged on the balcony of St. Peter's as the next pope, which is traditionally what happens after the white smoke emerges from the chimney. Then black smoke came forth from the chapel, signifying that the first vote did not elect a new pope, and so confusion prevailed over what was going on. Fast forward 2003, former FBI consultant Paul L. Williams published a book in which he wrote at some length about the 1958 conclave and quoted alleged declassified U.S. intelligence documents to the effect that the white smoke had indeed been caused by the election of Cardinal Siri, who had chosen the name Pope Gregory XVII. This is an excerpt from the book where it says, quote, "In 1954, Count della Torre, editor of the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano, warned Pope Pius XII of Cardinal Angelo Roncalli's communist sympathies. Other members of the black nobility expressed similar concerns." Close quote. Department of the State Confidential Biography, John the 23rd. That's the quote. This was quote was from the Department of State Confidential Biography called John the 23rd, issue date February 15th, 1974. In the description of the show, we're going to have all the footnotes for the sources that we have. According to another report, on October 26, 1958, when the cardinals were locked away in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope, mysterious events began to unfold. On the third ballot, Cardinal Siri, according to FBI sources, obtained the necessary votes and was elected as Pope Gregory XVII. White smoke poured from the chimney of the chapel to inform Catholics that a new pope had been chosen. The news was announced at 6 p.m. on Vatican radio. The announcer said, quote, "The smoke is white. There is absolutely no doubt. A pope has been elected." Close quote. However, a new pope did not emerge. Questions began to arise whether the smoke was white or gray. To quell such doubts, Monsignor Santaro, secretary of the Conclave of Cardinals, informed the press that the smoke indeed had been white and that a new pope had been elected. By evening, Vatican Radio announced that the results remained uncertain. On October 27th, 1958, the Houston Post headlined, quote, "Cardinals fail to elect pope in 4 ballots. Mix-up in smoke signals cause false reports," close quote. But the initial reports had been valid. On the 4th ballot, according to FBI sources, Siri again obtained the necessary votes and was elected as Supreme Pontiff. But the French cardinals annulled the results, claiming that the election would cause widespread riots and the assassination of several prominent bishops behind the Iron Curtain. For those who don't know, the Iron Curtain is what separated the communist East Bloc of Europe and the Soviet Union and the Western nations which were not communist. Some speculate that Cardinal Siri and or his family were threatened, and that as a result that he refused to accept the election. Other sources then say that the cardinals opted to elect an elderly transitional pope, Cardinal Federico Tedeschini, but he was too infirm to accept the papacy. Finally, on the 3rd day of balloting, Angelo Roncalli received the necessary votes to become Pope John XXIII, a conclave shrouded in mystery, scandal, and probable fraud. What is certain about the necessity of becoming a valid pope is that the person elected must willingly accept the office. So even if the reports that Cardinal Siri was elected are true, the fact that he did not formally accept the office, for whatever reasons, invalidates any claim that he became the pope. And that's important to say because there are some people out there who, for good reason, reject Angelo Roncalli's election as John the 23rd, but then they say that Cardinal Siri was secretly the true pope. But he can't be the true pope if he did not formally elect the office. So that conspiracy theory, which kind of fills in some of the gaps and it's for people who don't like to accept the Sedevacantist position. So instead of saying that the seat was vacant, that's what Sedevacante means the seat is vacant, or the chair of St. Peter is vacant, that there is no pope. So instead of saying that, they like to say that there was the chair was secretly occupied by Siri and not by Roncalli. Well, according to church law, the man elected has to accept the office formally in order to be the pope. So we can kind of discard that theory. So you're either stuck with Roncalli or Sedevacante. So let's continue. Likewise, as we have already proven, Angelo Roncalli was not a Catholic and was thereby ineligible to validly become pope. This places the Catholic Church in a very odd predicament, as the chaotic results which followed this conclave reveal the nature of it and also the scandalous players involved. Until this time, the world had never witnessed anything within the Catholic Church like what we have seen in the Vatican II Novus Ordo religion. No interfaith ecumenism, no new mass, no informal pantsuit nuns, no altar girls, no clown masses, no condemnation of the death penalty, no new Pentecost or springtime revivals, no world youth days, no globally traveling popes, no man-centered theology, or anything of the sort. John the 23rd was the first modernist domino to fall, and everything else followed him. So that is that concerning the 1958 conclave. So shrouded in mystery, there was somebody elected initially, and for several minutes, no one appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's to accept the fact they had been elected. So what happened in between the several minutes between the white smoke and then later in the evening when the black smoke came out, it's a mystery. No one, some people know, but they've never really revealed to the world. The FBI reports that Siri was elected are very likely, or perhaps even probable, but the Catholic Church does not rely on American federal Bureau investigation reports and investigations regarding these matters, so we can't really, take that, we can't take it to the bank. We take it with a grain of salt, and it's very likely that Siri was elected, and even in elections following that, like in 1963, 1978, also it was speculated that Siri had been elected those times too. But for whatever reason, some people think that the communists, who had really a stranglehold over a lot of Europe and many Catholic countries in Eastern Europe, that they threatened Cardinal Siri and his family, perhaps threatened to send them to Stalin's gulags, or no, well, not Stalin at the time, but anyway, to be sent, to Siberia. That might deter someone from accepting the papacy, but that's just speculation. We don't know for sure. But what we can know for sure is that Angelo Roncalli was not a Catholic. So let's summarize his life, his ministry, and his pontificate, shall we? So he was influenced and kept friends with modernists, Freemasons, socialists, and other sworn enemies of the church from his earliest days in the priesthood. We know that Freemasons claim that he was a member of at least 2 lodges or orders, and he was removed from his teaching post due to suspicion of heresy. We know that. We know that he worshipped and prayed with heretics and schismatics. We know that he made a public heretical statement regarding Catholics and Eastern schismatics as having the same faith. We know that the Conclave of 1958 was surrounded by suspicious activity and led many to believe that someone else had been elected pope and then coerced into refusing to accept the office. We know that after his election, Roncalli rehabilitated every living theologian who had been censured by Pope Pius XII due to suspicion of heresy, and then promoted them as theological experts at the Vatican II Council. He taught the heresy of religious liberty in Pacem in Terris, paving the way for its adoption at the Vatican II Council in its heretical document, Dignitatis Humanae. So that's kind of a summary wrapping up John the 23rd. We know by canon law, anyone who is a Freemason is automatically excommunicated and not a member of the church. And if you're not a member of the church, you can't become the Pope. We know that according to church law, or according to the decree of Pope Pius XII in the Holy Office, that anyone who assisted socialists or communists in any way was also likewise automatically excommunicated, ipso facto, meaning he doesn't need a papal bull or a formal decree saying that he was excommunicated. It was automatic, spiritually, out of the church. So if he's excommunicated and he was well known for supporting socialists, Marxists, and communists, that means he wasn't Catholic and therefore cannot be the Pope. So that puts us in this predicament of, what do we do? Do we accept a non-Catholic as the Pope? So if we accept one non-Catholic, why can't we accept a Protestant from becoming the Pope? Why can't Billy Graham be elected Pope? Why can't the Dalai Lama become Pope? Why can't the Supreme Imam, of Iran or whoever become Pope? So if one non-Catholic can become Pope, it just opens the floodgates for anyone. And obviously, the first premise is false. A non-Catholic cannot be Pope, right? You have to be a member of the church before you can be its visible head, right? So that goes without saying. But since Roncalli was not a Catholic, then therefore he cannot be Pope. It's really that simple. You don't have to come up with all of these, these grasping at straws, bending over backwards, anything but sedevacante, they say, right? So, we'll accept these modernist heretics as popes, and whenever they do and say Catholic things, we'll praise them and we'll follow and obey. But whenever they say non-Catholic things, then we'll resist them, to their face, like Paul did St. Peter, as if that were an equal corollary, but it's not, right? Regarding that, when St. Paul resisted Peter to his face, it wasn't because Peter was teaching heresy, and it wasn't because he was a heretic. It was because Peter was not acting according to what he himself believed. So he was being hypocritical in his actions, and that's what St. Paul resisted him for and gave him filial correction, as harsh as it might have seemed in his epistle to the Galatians. So those two things are not the same. So in order for someone to be your pope, the vicar of Christ on earth, you have to give them both recognition, yes, but you also have to give them obedience and everything but sin. So if he commands you to sin, obviously you cannot commit a sin. But if he's teaching heresy publicly and visibly, and we're not talking about material heresy where he accidentally says the wrong thing. We're talking about manifest heresy where he, as an educated theologian and the vicar of Christ on earth, guided by the Holy Ghost, knowing what he's saying, and he purposely teaches wrong, purposely teaches contrary to what the church has always taught, then he's not Catholic anymore. It's not a matter of resisting him, right? And whenever the magisterium decrees anything, whether it be an encyclical like Laudato Si from Francis, or Amoris Laetitia, where adulterers can receive communion, and that, you can't pick and choose. It can't be the Pope speaks and I decide when to obey him. No, that's not how Catholicism works. It's a zero-sum game. It's all or nothing, right? So if the man who claims to be Pope is not a Catholic, then he's not really the Pope. It's that simple. That's what the Sedevacantist position is. So most Sedevacantists, including myself, we believe that when the Pope Pius XII died, the chair became vacant and it has not been filled since. So a lot of people will say, and this is a repeat of what I said before, so bear with me if you've heard me say this before. A lot of people say, well, God will never allow that. For 70 years, almost 70 years now, 68 years, there hasn't been a pope. That's ridiculous, they say. God would never allow that. First of all, we are not in a place to say what God would or would not allow, right? As the scripture says in Isaiah, so are my thoughts higher than yours, says the Lord, and my ways higher than yours. As far as the heaven is above the earth, so are my thoughts and my ways higher than yours, according to scripture, right? And there is a precedent in the Old Testament of 70 years when the Jews were taken away as captives into Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple in 586 BC. For 70 years, the Jews did not have access to proper worship in the temple, right? So for 70 years, they were without the priesthood, the hierarchy, the high priest, the tabernacle, the temple, the animal sacrifices. They didn't have it. All they could do was hold fast to tradition. That's what the book of Daniel says. That's what teaches us, right? Daniel and his friends, they held fast to tradition and they did not compromise on the tradition. But of course, and they prayed often, and that's all they could do, and that's all we can do, right? If especially if you're in an area where you don't have the Catholic Mass, the valid Catholic Mass to go to, you can't receive the sacraments. Like Japanese Catholics for several decades, after the Jesuits were kicked out of Japan, right? The Catholics over there, they were lucky if they had any priests at all, to give them sacraments, but they held fast to the faith, right? They held fast to tradition. So in some cases that's the best case scenario. You could do devotions, you could pray your rosary, you could pray other prayers, you could pray you could get your indulgences, you could say your spiritual act of communion, pray your act of contrition, try to be in a state of sanctifying grace, say your act of contrition often. That's the best we could do sometimes. And some of us are fortunate to be in driving distance from a legitimate Mass. So those are some of the things, how we deal with the situation. But a lot of people will say, well, Sedevacantists are schismatics, right? And if the Novus Ordo religion of Vatican II were the Catholic faith and were the Catholic Church, that would be correct. But it's not, right? So you have to ask yourself, Sedevacantists, we're just Catholics who practice the Catholic faith and believe everything that the Church has always taught, exactly the same as it was when Pope Pius XII died in 1958. So how in the world can we be schismatics if we're just practicing and believing Catholicism like it was in 1958 and all of the centuries before that? How can we be the schismatics? The word schism means to cut, right? To cut away from, like a garment away from, cutting a cloth off of your shirt, right? That would be a schismatic, the piece of cloth you tear off of. So who are the true schismatics, right? Is it those who keep tradition, or those who break away from tradition and invent new traditions that doesn't come from the apostles? You would have to say that those who break away from tradition and make new traditions that were never a part of what the apostles taught, those would be the schismatics. So the modernists of Vatican II, who invented new rites, new sacraments, a new religion in substance, even though the externals might be very similar, right? Similar enough to fool a lot of people. Those are the ones who are the schismatics. It's not those who keep the faith and hold fast to tradition, right? And a lot of us will say, "Oh, we're Protestants." Oh, that's really funny, considering that John the 23rd and all of his successors since then embraced Protestants as separated brethren, and not in the way that separated in the sense that they need to come back in order to be saved, because Pope Pius XI used that phrase separated brethren in a couple of encyclicals, but he meant it in a way that they're outside of the church and they need to come back into the church, into the fold. They need to be converted. No, the Vatican II popes say that they are partially in communion with the church, which is a novel doctrine, right? That's different. They're not heretics or schismatics according, or not, you could say not formally, according to Vatican II theology, right? They might be material heretics, but they know not what they do kind of thing. But in reality, spiritually, they're partially in communion, which is a novelty, right? You can't be partially one foot in the church and one foot out. You're either in or you're out. Pope Pius the third, Pope Leo the 13th said, if anyone does not accept even one doctrine proposed by the authentic magisterium, he is an alien to the church. Alien means totally foreign to the church, not partially in, right? So, sorry. I mean, I know many Protestants are very pious. They mean well. They love Jesus. They believe in the Trinity, the divinity of Christ, a lot of the same doctrines as the Catholic Church. But, according to Catholic teaching, they're not in the church. And we need to pray for their salvation. And we need to not dialogue with them for the sake of dialoguing. We need to dialogue with them for the sake of converting them and bringing them into the fold. Right, just as the Catholic Church did with the Arian heretics of the 4th century and the Docetists and the Gnostics. They try to convert them, bring them back in, right? And every heresy that came down through the ages, just like the Catholic Church has always tried to convert Jews and Muslims to become Catholics, but now the Vatican II Church does not want to convert them because they call it proselytizing. We don't want to argue theology with them. We don't want to make theological arguments that say that we're right and they're wrong. No, that's arrogant, they say. Through their ignorance, maybe they can be saved. Invincible ignorance, desire, baptism of desire, even though they remain in a false religion. And they kind of conflate invincible ignorance with a false understanding of baptism of desire. They kind of conflate those two things, which they're not the same thing at all. And to say, well, it's possible they can be saved, if they're really ignorant and they're trying to find the truth and for some reason they can never find it, and they make all those excuses, but that's not Catholic doctrine. Right? The Catholic doctrine is that if you're truly seeking the truth, then God will reveal the truth to you. He'll go to great lengths. He'll send an angel. He'll miraculously send a missionary to you, to baptize you and go to great lengths to bring you into the Catholic Church. Right? Because God can do anything. Nothing is impossible with God, nothing is impossible. Right? But to make all these kind of like these, you going in mazes trying to not be hereticals at the same time saying that non-Catholics can be saved, that's just not honest. Let's just be honest. Out of charity for those who are not Catholic, let's be charitable enough to tell the truth. Non-Catholics need to be converted to the Catholic faith, right? Even though, the Catholic Church is kind of in eclipse right now, right? With the false body moving in front of the Catholic Church, the false body being the Novus Ordo religion of Vatican II. a pseudo-church with a pseudo-hierarchy beginning with John the 23rd. This is why understanding John the 23rd and his successors is so important, because it becomes so obvious that these men are not Catholic that the only other position really you can embrace is the Sedevacantist position. To recognize a non-Catholic as a pope is just nonsensical. It's illogical. It's folly. So I'm sorry, the recognize and resist folks aren't going to like to hear that, and I'm sure they'll have some comebacks and some retorts to that. That's fine, I guess. It's not logically fine, but I'm not going to make enemies with people who have the Catholic faith and are honestly seeking the truth. But I just don't. I don't think that position is tenable. It's kind of like the Novus Ordites. They have the obedience thing correct, and a lot of doctrinal matters incorrect. And then you have the recognize and resist folks who have a lot of doctrinal matters correct, but they don't have like the obedience to a valid pope thing correct, right? It was Vatican I Council saying that all Catholics have to receive with religious obedience, any proclamation from the Holy See as if it were from heaven, right? That's our posture towards the teaching of the Vatican and the papacy, coming from the magisterium. That should be our attitude and our posture. It shouldn't be, it's up to us to determine whether or not this is Catholic and then determine if we're to obey or not. No, that's not how that works. Catholics are obedient to legitimate authority. So the question is the authority legitimate? Is the Pope Catholic? Not a rhetorical question, an actual question right now, right? And no, Leo the 14th, although he'll make some appeals to traditionalists in some ways, he'll throw out a traditional bone to have the dogs run after it, so to speak. But anybody see that recent photo of him in a Pachamama worship service in the 1990s, a la Francis? And it's like, man, that's just a violation of the first commandment and a total apostasy. So there goes that, right? So nope, no restoration in 2025 either. So we got 7 Novus Ordo Pontiffs up, 7 Novus Ordo Pontiffs down. So stay with us next time for our series on Paul VI. And it's about to get juicy. Paul VI, he might be the worst among the bunch, right? I call him Paul the Destroyer. He really destroyed the visibility of the Catholic Church, very much so, right? In the public eye. He made so many changes. So many changes happened during his pontificate. It's just amazing how someone can have the audacity to canonize this man as a saint. It's truly tragic. And even more tragic are the souls that are being lost through the false Novus Ordo religion, even though they might be of goodwill. Very sad. We have to pray for them, for sure. Pray for their conversion to the true Catholic faith. So until then, again, happy Easter, happy Eastertide. I offer you a Roman salute from the bottom of my Roman heart. Nothing but love from the Empire. God bless.